This is Sean from Rusted Rooster Farm. We're building some Sayre grain bins, and so this is what we're cutting the culvert in half with. A sawzall would work. What we did is we got a pretty stiff blade so it wouldn't bend side to side, and then just shoved it down so that it's riding right in the middle and pulling it down around and cutting it. Okay, this is Sean again. So we took and also cut the outer flare ring off the one end of the culvert. This is just where the two culverts would connect together. We cut it right off this surface right here so that we can have a nice surface to screw down to the pallet. And now we're gonna mark out the perforated flooring, cutting it. The magic marker didn't seem to want to work, so we just decided we would spray paint around it. So there's Dad going at it with the spray paint, and when we pick it up we should have a good clear mark. So when we did the slanted floor bin, we ended up cutting a piece of styrofoam and wedging it inside of the culvert right here, and then we spray painted around one edge. We didn't get a very even cut, it was quite uneven. So then I ended up taking a piece of plywood here, and we put this down on the styrofoam and marked around this, and then wedged that in there and spray painted around on it. I got a thin piece so that when you turned it sideways it would wedge up about right, and then I just screwed some reinforcement boards to the bottom. It turns out that it was quite time consuming to try and get this angle right, and it was a little challenging to get the slanted floor in there properly. So I'm hoping that the flat floored bins, well, I know they're going to take a lot less time, and I don't think there's going to be that much difference in user friendly. Thanks for watching. Okay, so now we're cutting these out. We have a turbo steer here and just kind of running it right around that outside edge. This particular one cuts a ring out there with that. Kind of cuts the slot out. Does a pretty nice job. We ended up on the other floor, tried the other thing that worked fairly well was a metal cutting blade with a jigsaw, if you do not have one of these nibblers. I also tried one of the nibblers that had bypass blades that went like this, and that didn't work nearly as good. You need the one that either cuts the kerf out of the middle, or you need to use a jigsaw blade, I believe is the easiest way to cut the flooring out. Okay, here's the round piece of flooring. The original one that I did with Dorn we cut out with a pair of tin snips, but that was quite time consuming and hard on the hand, so this is a much easier way to do it. Okay, so we cut it out and stuck it in there, but I don't know if you can see this, it's kind of, it didn't quite fit. We cut it a little bit on the large side, so we're just gonna have to probably trim off some edges with the tin snips before it's gonna work quite right for us. Okay, now we're marking for the top, cutting it a little bit bigger than the outside edge so it should be able to shed the water. So we just flipped it upside down, then he's just using his finger to space it away from the rib a little bit. We get a nice line so it should cover the outer edge and hopefully shed the water, though it's probably not going to matter because we're going to put some sealant inside to keep it so that it wouldn't be able to creep around the edge anyways. Okay, so now we're cutting the floor out for the with the sawzall. We just took the culvert, marked it upside down, and then just cutting it with the sawzall. Okay, so we're looking at the bins and what you're going to need for wood cutouts here. So for the cross members, we're going to go with four cross members across, two at 33 inches, and those are going to need a 45-degree angle to match the curve of the culvert. And then the two middle ones are 40 inches at a 15-degree angle, because when you get to the middle the curve isn't quite as much. Okay, so now we have the top and the bottom. We have the bottom is a little bit smaller than the top so that hopefully it doesn't stick out very far and catch water. And then the top is a little bit bigger. We're going to put a solid piece of tin on this to shed the water. Down here we have all the brackets and the supports for underneath the floor. So we have 6 at 9 inches. And these are going to be the ones that screw to the sidewall that the flooring screws down. We have 6 at 8 inches. These are going to be the legs to go down across, support the weight off the cross members. And then we have 8 of these that are going to go underneath where the cross members are to support that weight. I'll take a later video to show you where everything goes. Sean again, working on the grain bin. Here's what we have. So this is what we did. We spaced those 8 inches apart. Those are the cross members you see. These are what we used. The longer ones, the 9-inch ones, were for 3 side cleats right there. The 5.5-inch ones go underneath the stringers here. And that's what we used all of our little pieces for. And also we have these ones here, the 8-inch ones. We're going to use those for the legs, just leaving them down a little bit from the top as to not impede the airflow, because we only want to block air on these 4 sections, so we kind of minimize the air blockage from underneath. So we're cutting the door. We cut a 7-inch wide by 7.5-inch tall hole. And then we're working on cutting the culvert back, which we're doing with a Sawzall. We put a flexible blade in it, and you just kind of cut each rib off, and then you got to cut it this way to get it off, and we'll get these with the grinder a little bit later here. But you want to go ahead and cut that? I'll videotape. To remove these middle ribs right here. They stick up too high, and we got to be able to screw a piece of wood flat to it. So we're going to try and just slide the blade down. So that was the toughest part right there, and I spent quite a long time on the last bin trying to figure out how to properly do that. And turns out the key is a flexible metal cutting blade that you can just kind of push down and it'll bend flat with it and you can work it around. And then we'll touch it up with an angle grinder. Okay, so we're taking a video. The neighbor saw us doing this and brought this tool up, and it seems to work pretty well.
That's what makes
Working on the other side.
six sets of eyes looking at it. 8 sets of eyes looking at it.
Okay, so the other option is an angle grinder with the flap wheel on it. That's a little slower, but works all right. That's what I did the last bin with.
Battery's dead. Actually, I think that does a pretty good job too to finish it up for smoothing. You know, to smooth it up. I think that's a good idea.
It does. It just takes a little longer.
Yeah. Does a nice job.
So that's the other option. I mean, it works pretty well. They both work pretty well. I think the zip tool is a little faster than the grinder though. It's a little more painless. Get into the corners well. Okay, so we have the grain doors here, and so we had cut the hole and hollowed it out, and then just cut a piece of plywood, the outside dimension of the door, a little bit higher, so that we could just use our, you know, so the door slides all the way up. You want the door to slide up nice. Just keep in mind that the plywood is the back part of your slide here, so don't cut it back too far. You want your door to slide in between the metal rail and the plywood. And then just, I had screwed it on the previous one. I screwed this to the culvert first, and then I had screwed this door on. My father bolted it. I think the bolting is a much nicer, you know, it's attached really well. So he just drilled it and bolted all the way through the bin to the door. And you can see the screws that hold the plywood on there to start with. So that's how we did the door. We'll be bending a piece of tin for the chute a little bit later on here, and we'll videotape that process. Okay, we also have the floor here. So these were part of the culvert caps that originally I thought I was just going to cap it, not have to buy any plywood, but they tended out to be really cheesy, and I was not happy with them, and they were rather expensive too. So I decided not to use those. I mean, they're nowhere near secure enough to keep anything, and I felt a solid piece of plywood to screw the bin to was much better. So those, we put a piece of plywood down. This is just the leftover plastic cap that I'm using, but I would suggest just taking a piece of flat stock sheet metal like we used for the top of the tin roof, and just screw that tin right on. Use a tin piece to keep the moisture from the bottom. I think that will work just as well. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna screw this down on this plywood down onto the pallet. So the pallet is kind of thick. So I'm thinking we're gonna try and toenail the, let's see if I can get this to focus. Okay, so we'll just try and toenail like that, and get this screwed down onto the pallet. It's a little bit tricky because the plastic is kind of thin, but if we put enough screws in it, it should hold just fine. The other one held real well, and then we'll just put a couple of metal roofing screws with the gasket to hold the plastic on top. We're going to be putting an M-seal gasket around the bottom of this to seal it and keep it airtight. That's right here, and it just here's some of it unrolled. It unrolls, and you just kind of peel the plastic off and stick it to this edge all the way around, like so. That way we can just set it down on that edge, and it should seal. This foam will expand and seal whatever cracks there is, and it's airtight. So at that point we'll be locking any air circulation or moisture out of the bottom of the bin. Okay, so we're working on drilling the hole down here for the vent pipe to go in. We got a 4.5-inch hole saw. You just want to be a little careful when you drill this hole to go easy, or it'll catch and kick on you pretty good. Okay, so there's our hole. Now we need to cut the plastic away on the other side here. We have it coming through right here, and we just need to cut the rib back so that we can put our pipe fitting. And this is just a 4-inch PVC screw union here, and what we're going to do is we're going to unscrew it here. Okay. Stick this side through from the inside. Put this one on the outside and clamp it down. Put some caulking there. So there's our hole. We still need to cut these back and smooth it down like we did on the other to get a good seam that we can screw down to so it can join up tight. Okay, so we ran into a little bit of trouble here. We got one of these joints stuck before it tightened up, and got to reefing on it, and we broke the culvert right there. That got us to thinking a little bit, maybe we should reinforce it in case the aerator tube gets yanked on a little hard. So we're just going to put this in behind there, and then we're going to screw it together on that. So what we got was, I'll get my piece here. I'll use this one. So we're going to stick it like this. So we took and caulked around our fitting right there, so as to not get the glue down there before it joins up, and then just screw it down together, hopefully until it matches up. Okay, so we did that with the piece of plywood underneath like that. Just cut the hole in it with the hole saw, and that seemed to work pretty good. We screwed it together. You can see. Well, if it'll focus, it's pretty tight there with the joint. We won't be leaking any air there. Caulking gun just like this to kind of get that sealed in when it's sucked in. We had trouble. I tried to caulk both pieces, but the best thing was to caulk this piece so it doesn't start contacting the caulking until you get it screwed all the way down. It makes it really hard to screw in. Okay, so here's what we did. We put the inner screw piece right there. And then we caulked around it and screwed the upper piece down onto it. And that's how you... this one hasn't been glued down yet. But you can see generally how it works. Okay, so now we're sticking the M-Seal. This is the brand of it, but it's just a foam sealant. Sticking that around the edge there so we can tip it up and it'll seal. Okay, so now we screwed the plywood down right here and just screwed it all the way around the edge. Took 2-inch gold screws and just toe-nailed them in to get as much of the plastic as we could. Tacked it right down all the way around, and it's pretty securely attached there. And then we just took a couple of roofing screws and screwed the plastic top on to keep the moisture down if we get any moisture in there, and keep it water and airtight, hopefully. So, but I just wanted that plastic piece held there when we set the culvert down so it doesn't jump around any. Okay, so we got some 5-inch gold screws and we're just screwing down through that rib into the pallet there. So you see he'll just put them in until they tighten up. About every 8 inches all the way around. That's what's going to hold it to the pallet. Okay, here we're reviewing the finished grain bin along with a blower setup for it. So we have it all done here. We got the grain door. We ended up building the tin grain door out of a little bit deeper stuff. The first chute I built overflowed on the side, so we added some depth to here. And then what we also did was ran it underneath the flooring and then screwed down through it so that the stuff comes pretty seamlessly. We did end up caulking a little bit there and a little bit there to just make sure no grain escapes. So that's the finishing touch to that. And what we ended up with for, we decided bungee cord. So we just took a piece of plywood and screwed it on here, and the bungee cord hooks right here to hold the top on. There's another one on the other side here. So that we thought it would be best if you could just unhook the top and set it aside. So we have the other one here with the slanted floor. We decided to hold the top on that way. I did try to hinge it, but it was not working. It would hinge up pretty high, and when you let it slam, it would it broke my hinge off because you couldn't put 2 hinges on it. So here's this one here, and this was too short. So again, what we did is slid it under there and then brought it up here and riveted it to this face, and that seemed to work pretty good. You do have to allow a little bit of room right in here. Let's see if you can see it. You got to allow that crack because the door slides down along that. I don't know if we can see it. It's kind of hard to see, but the door slides right down in that groove there. So here's the other one, and here's the lid. So the lids we had built out of 3/4 inch plywood, just like the bottom. Put the M-Seal all the way around. We also screwed some of these little pegs here to kind of guide it onto the gasket so that you wouldn't mess your gasket up putting it on. So now I've set the top up there to see, and you can just kind of arrange it so that your gasket fits down there, and you can see the mark on the gasket where it's sitting there. The nice thing about this M-Seal is it will expand and fill a pretty good gap. So if you didn't get the barrel cut completely evenly, by the time you latch these down, it'll get rid of any of those air spaces. Unless it's really cold, it just takes a little while to reform. It doesn't come back to its original shape right away. But there you see we attached the bungee cord and it sucks it down there for a pretty nice airtight seal. So there you have it. I'll show you what I did for blower setup over here. So these are the Harbor Freight 2 horsepower dust collectors. They came with this rolling tray with caster wheels underneath it. Now I didn't like how long the tray was because the tray used to extend out to about here because it had the dust collector on it as well, but I just decided I cut it off with a Sawzall, and then I just welded those caster wheels under. You could drill and bolt those, but I wanted it to not be much bigger than the blower itself footprint. And then to adapt it to the, it comes like this. There's the blower inside there. To adapt it to the bin, I bought these, actually you just need the 2 45-degree street elbows. I felt that the street elbows were a shallower curve, and if you don't want to put too steep of a curve on it, or else it will restrict some of your airflow. So those just sit in there like that. I put 2 of those. It comes with this flexible hose here, which you'll see I have one all hooked up. So then I just duct taped it all because duct tape is pretty cheap and easy, and if you ever wanted to reuse the stuff for anything else, you can just peel the duct tape off and there you go. So I just used those 2 street elbows. I did have to cut a short chunk of 4-inch PVC for this to fit over and taped on. And I also cut a short chunk up here to go between here and here. This was a little too large to slide over the big beld end on the PVC. Maybe if I fought with it, but I just figured I would tape it and that would be easy. So then you can turn your fan on there. Of course, look, the top, apparently it's sealed pretty well. Decided to just do a little jumping since we didn't have the door open. But if you open the door, you get quite a blast of air out the door. So that's the way it works. The other thing I do need to try is see if I can empty these bins with the blower without having to sweep it. We'll try that in a little later video. But that's the complete setup. I'm going to list a description of the parts used and the cost for all this stuff piece by piece in a separate video, or maybe I'll do it in the description. Thanks for watching.